Welcome to the Blue Line Project, real talk from the front lines of American policing. We cut through the noise, challenge broken metrics, and focus on solutions that keep officers safe, communities strong, and justice real. Blue Line Strong. Here is your host, John Gabrielson.
Welcome to the Blue Line Project, and I'm your host, John Gabrielson, and I'm so excited about this week's episode. I just got back last week from the Texas Chiefs Conference down in Corpus Christi, Texas, and had a great time, but I learned so much as we introduced our data analytics and how we can help chiefs improve using their data and just being better at it, just like we were talking about with Joel Fargus on the last episode. In fact, Joel was down there with me on Tuesday while we were at the booth just talking to chiefs and asking a lot of questions. But before I dig into this week's episode, because we're going to talk about some of the things that I learned from the chiefs of police while I was down there for a few days with them, I want to start by saying, hey, if you like what we're doing here at the Blue Line Project, I need you guys to like and follow this podcast. I need you to tell all your friends to get our metrics up so we can get our views and our likes up so we can keep doing the show week after week. I really enjoy it. I'm getting great feedback from those of you who are watching the show. I want to keep it rolling. If you like what we're doing here, make sure you like and follow us. If you're on Rumble, smack that bell. If you're on any of the other platforms, like and follow, share these links, and put your comments and send me emails. I want to hear back from y'all because I really want to grow the show and make it better. I really enjoy doing it and bringing this information week after week. In fact, we're growing so much. I got a new camera. So you guys have here in the studio, we've got a better camera now. We're upgrading things. Got some new studio lighting. So just a lot of things that are happening here because of your guys' support and what we're doing. So we just want to keep that rolling and keep moving forward into the show. Well, as we dive into episode 8, one of the things that I found fascinating talking to the chiefs, and I've known this for a long time, is report writing. And the reason report writing came up is because I asked every chief the same question that came by our booth. I said, Chief, how do you feel about your metrics? How do you feel that the data you're getting from the report writing and from your RMS and from your CAD system, how do you feel? Do you feel like you're getting good data that is actually good, usable, and digestible? And it was almost universal. They would stop, get kind of a weird look on their face. They didn't know. And then they would all end up saying, yeah, I don't like my data. And then I said, well, can we make it better? How can we improve it? What can we do? What do you think you need to do your better job? And I got a whole bunch of answers. But one of the things that kept coming up is patrol officers writing better reports, getting better data, getting addresses entered correctly, getting entities entered correctly, getting suspects and victims entered correctly, addresses correctly, phone numbers correctly, emails correct. And then within the reports, if there's errors within the reporting, and at APD, we call them IBR errors, or errors where you've made mistakes in how you report things or how you link things together, fixing those errors so that we can actually draw the data out, actually having categories for community engagement, community and policing and crime prevention, and actually looking at those metrics and numbers. These are all important things that a chief needs to make decisions. The other thing a chief needs is to be able to have that data at their fingertips. One of the products we're offering out using their material, using their thing, we're bringing in software. Like let's say they have Microsoft, we're bringing in Power BMI, and we're creating dashboards that Joel talked about in the last podcast for them to have easy access to the data. When I told all the chiefs, hey, if I could give you a product that you could access in under 5 clicks on your cell phone, on your iPad, or on your laptop, would that be something that's beneficial to you? You don't have to spend $250,000. A lot of the chiefs are like, what you're saying is you can do this for free. Yeah, using your information, entering it in and putting it into these platforms that you already have, using the RMS system that you already have. I also noticed that a lot of chiefs are looking for new RMSs and ways to improve that side of the house. And a lot of these companies are telling them that they're doing some of the things that Joel and I were showing them that we're capable of doing with the product that we're offering as it relates to report writing. And, Joel was telling me that there's a lot of these RMSs that have a lot of promises, but they don't always deliver exactly the way you think, and they don't always bring the data the way that we would bring it to you here at CRI when we're talking about our data-driven policing. For you to have effective police network investigations, for you to have effective investigations, period, you have to have good reporting. And let's be honest, most police reports, and my folks in law enforcement know, are bad, right? And they're not just imperfect, but they're unclear, they're incomplete, they're unusable. And so I could create the best dashboards in the world. I could sell them the best product in the world, the best training in the world. I could do all of that. But if the data coming in is terrible, then I'm at a loss. There's nothing more that I can do at that point. And so the scary part is that these reports that are coming in, the data that's coming in is what drives prosecutions. It's what shapes investigations, and it's what impacts the justice system itself and makes things actually work. So now remember in a couple episodes I talked about the recidivism rate and judges letting bad people back out. Well, now couple that with bad police reports and bad data coming in, bad data and PC affidavits or incomplete information. Did you see how that makes it so much easier for a judge or a prosecutor to choose to either lower a bond or choose not to prosecute because of bad police reports and bad information? So we're going to ask some hard questions, and I'm going to ask it right now. If chiefs believe, as I found out at the Chiefs conference, that they're getting bad data and that bad data is leading to poor decisions, and like the chief said, if they want to say they're going to be data driven in their policy making and in their decision making, and I'm talking across the board, right? We're not talking just about police reports. We're talking about use of force, training, continuing education, firearms training. We're talking about records keeping. We're talking about all the data, right? What would it take for us to actually fix these problems? How do we address this? How do we make these changes? And that's kind of what I want to talk about today on this episode, is just talking about what changes we can make. And also want to tell you that CRI is going to be doing some new things coming down the pike. We have a new class that I'm putting together because I saw a need after the Chiefs conference just on report writing. We're going to try to do an online and an in-person class. I'm going to try to put that together over the next 2 to 3 months. I hope to have it ready before August so we can release it at the TCO conference. So if you're going to be at the TCO conference and you saw us at the Chiefs conference, we'll be there in Waco, Texas at the TCO conference in August. Hopefully we'll have the class for then that we can roll out. And I'm going to try to make it either a free or a really reduced price class for you all. And just before we move on with the show, I also want to let you know that there's going to be some changes to CRI and what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how our training division is running. And so just want to keep you posted on that. We're putting together some new things and bringing some things on board, I think, that are going to really help bring better training and better products to you guys in the way of training. So just keep all that in mind, because that's all going to tie into today's episode and future episodes. And then also, just so you know, next week, coming up is Chief Chris Vallejo from Topeka, Kansas. He's a friend of mine. I met Chris when I was still at Austin Police Department. When I met him actually when he was a sergeant, and then he promoted up to lieutenant, and he was there in community engagement as an executive lieutenant with the chief's office, and then he promoted to commander and became my commander in 2019, late 2019 into 2020. So I'm excited to have Chief Vallejo on to talk about his first months up there in Topeka, Kansas, and making that transition. And we're going to talk about a lot of these things as well. So just keep that in mind. So let's get back to the show and back to where we were going. So we talked about why are police reports so bad and what would it actually take to fix these reports. So I want to say this. I think sometimes people think that the reports are bad because, well, it's lazy officers. I've heard that. I've heard chiefs, I've heard others say, well, the officers are just lazy, and so therefore we're getting bad reports. I don't think it's just that. I don't think officers are lazy. I mean, I look at my young officers that are working the streets in Austin right now, and let me tell you, those guys work their butts off. Those men and women are out there taking call to call to call to call, and they really work hard. So I don't think it's about laziness. I think there's some generational things. I think writing skills in general aren't being taught in school. Everybody's getting reliant upon artificial intelligence and Grammarlies and grammar checks, and we're all typing, and so we've lost handwritten skills. So I think there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot going on. I think we have a broken system in the educational side that's producing predictable results. What I mean by that is we have a system where we're pumping out kids who truly don't think as much as people in the past. What I mean by that is everything's at their fingertips. So they don't have to dig for information. They can go to an app or Google and just type in something and bam, they have that information. And that quick speed information really hurts critical thinking and the ability to write and really put your thoughts on paper. Because let's be honest, AI itself takes a lot of the thinking out of it. I mean, one of the reasons that you learn math in school is to learn how to think better, right? Think through the algebraic, equations and things like that. I was terrible at math. Let me tell y'all, I was horrible at math. So maybe that's a bad example. But my point is, I think there's a lot of things that are the issue, but I think most of it is correctable and can be addressed. So some key points. Reports are critically important. I want to reiterate that they're the foundation of the actual judicial process. What I mean by that is this. When a person gets arrested, the officer has to write a police report detailing the facts of the case and what happened and why they were there and what happened while they were there and the interviews that they conducted and decisions that they made. They put that into a police report. And let's say somebody's going to get arrested for, let's just say, a domestic disturbance, assault with injury, family violence, right? So let's say they get arrested. Well, then that officer has to go write a probable cause affidavit, laying out the probable cause for the arrest. That's foundational in future prosecution. Yet, if you put bad information in that, then the prosecutors are going to struggle, right? Detectives are going to have to go back and rework things because the initial information was bad. So, like, let's say I take a burglary of a residence and I leave out important factors like the time that they entered in, or the approximate time they entered in, or things like that. Simple information. Or let's say I go to a trespassing call in an apartment complex and I find the trespasser, but I never put in information about what apartment were they at, who were they there seeing. That's information that an apartment manager would need to make a determination if there's lease violations for unauthorized guests and things like that. But then you also have supervisors that have to review these. One of the things that I know that was happening at the agency that I still work for is supervisors were overwhelmed with so many supervisor responsibilities that they stopped reviewing all the reports as thoroughly. And so a lot of reports were making it through the system with mistakes. Now, when I was a young officer, if you wrote a bad report, well, going all the way back to my field training days, if I wrote a bad report, my FTO read it, he'd be like, no, this is junk, rewrite it. Or change this, change that. That's not falsifying a report. That's making it good grammar. And at CRI, we want to teach you to be clear, concise, and very well spoken with good grammar. So it's not about having changing the report. It's about writing it correctly, getting all the facts and details in there, right? Then a supervisor would go back and review it. If you forgot, let's say, to check the racial profiling box, or let's say you pointed your firearm at somebody and there's a study box that you have to for pointed firearm. If you miss those little steps, the report won't verify. And then a supervisor would go back in and be like, hey, this is wrong, and you'd go back and fix it. By doing that, you're correcting those reports. You're getting the best data possible to your data analysts, to your supervisors, ultimately all the way up to the chief's office so they can make data-driven decisions. What I guess I'm saying is we've normalized low-quality documentation. It's the best way I can say it. We've normalized this practice. If reports were treated like we treat evidence, because at the end of the day they are, we would never accept these current low standards. We just wouldn't accept it. But for whatever reason, we are accepting it as a community, as a profession. If we want to call ourselves professionals like other professions, then we have to hold ourselves accountable. For example, if an attorney is doing bad work, they can go before the board and have their license revoked by other professionals within their profession. Same thing with nurses and doctors and other professions. I believe it should be very similar in law enforcement, because if we're considering ourselves an actual profession, then we need to treat ourselves and hold ourselves to a higher standard. So I guess my first point here is number one, we have to hold people to a higher standard, but then we have to teach them how to do it. But we said, why are reports bad? First thing I said, I don't think it's because officers are lazy. So what do I think it is? I think it is that training fails the mission. I'm going to say that again. Training fails the mission. We teach formats, not thinking. Remember I talked about at the beginning of the show, thinking through things, being able to think. You have to be able to think to be able to write. And the way you work on critical thinking is by reading and writing, learning from others, going to class. but learning how to think. If you just teach somebody a format, but you don't actually teach them how to think and then articulate, you're going to have a problem. A problem. For example, while you're in the academy, you get templates. Even within our report writing system, you have a template for a criminal trespass or a criminal trespass notice or a criminal trespass authorization, whatever form that is taking, depending on what you're doing. It's a fill in the blank writing. When you do fill in the blank writing, it takes away the thinking process of being able to process each element. So, for example, if I'm writing an affidavit on a family violence arrest, and I've arrested an individual for assault with injury, family violence, I have to have certain things. So when I would write my PC affidavit or write my report, I would go to the penal code. I would look at the section. I would see at the elements of my offense on visible injury or a complaint of pain, right? I have to have one of those two elements to make an arrest on assault with injury, family violence. So then I would be able to articulate how I got the complaint of pain, whether as I asked the victim or I saw the victim was so badly hurt that it was just obvious if they couldn't talk to me that they had to have a complaint of pain because the injury was so bad. Plus, you have the physical injuries, right? So my point is, it's not just about format, it's about knowing and understanding the elements and then be able to articulate those elements in a report, not just fill in the blank. And in other words, what I'm saying is narrative clarity, be able to tell a story. I've read some of the police reports today because even in my job in community engagement, I read a lot of reports. And one of the things I see is they're teaching this format like, this is why I responded, this is what I did, and something else down below. But there's no actual narrative. When I was taught to write police reports, I actually wrote a narrative. So while I was on duty and on patrol, I responded to 123 ABC Street on a domestic disturbance. Upon arrival, I noticed the front door was open. I could hear voices inside. I could see what appeared to be a disturbance. Things were disheveled, whatever, right? I made entry. I knocked on the door, announced myself as Austin Police, Officer Gabrielson. I saw two individuals, and the first individual was identified as so-and-so, and then I would put their identifier there. The second individual was identified as so-and-so. First, I spoke with the victim, and then I would write about what I spoke with the victim. Then I went and I spoke with the potential suspect, da, 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 da. And then I would just put a narrative of everything that I did in an actual logical format telling the story of what happened. That was my report. My report was narrative and it was clarity. Within that narrative, I would articulate my probable cause based on what I was learning. But I did that for burglaries. I did that for auto thefts. I did that for really any report that I wrote. I told a story. I told a story in a narrative with clarity. If I had probable cause, I articulated. If I had reasonable suspicion, like say I made a traffic stop, I would say, if I had to put notes on the back of my ticket, I would be like, I observed the driver driving southbound on 183, 65 miles an hour. I clocked the driver at 85 miles an hour using my laser. I was sitting in the 1300 block. This is where I observed them. I stopped them in whatever 100 block, and I'd write that on the back of my ticket. Why was I writing that narrative? So that when I'd go to court, I'd be able to look at my ticket and say, yeah, this is when I stopped them. This is what I did. This is what I was using, or if I paced them or whatever it was, right? So I was using a narrative. I was articulating my probable cause, and then I was structuring my events in a logical order in the way in which they occurred. I arrived. I saw this. I did this. I did this. I did this. I did this. Everything flowed logically. Then oftentimes at the end, I might do a little summary, bullet points, something like that. But the actual narrative flowed. In the police reports I'm seeing today, we're not doing that. We're kind of just doing like a block, a block, a block, and it's not really flowing. So I think number one, we need to understand that training is failing the mission because we're teaching officers how to fill in blanks. We're teaching officers how to write like bullet point blocks, but we're not teaching them how to write a narrative to tell a story because you have to tell the story. If you have a sexual assault, you have to tell the story of what you saw and what was told to you by the victim. And you basically have to recreate. I remember one of the very first sexual assaults I took, I was very articulate in how I said it. And And you have to say things that are uncomfortable because I had to ask the victim uncomfortable questions. And in my report, I couldn't sanitize what she said. Sometimes you have to write the hard things. You have to write what they tell you. And today it's even easier because back then I didn't have a body camera. I just had a mic on my body and I'd have to go back and listen to my in-car camera oftentimes to listen to that interview because but now I have a body camera so I can actually watch the interview. So it just makes it so much easier. Number 2 is time and environment. I believe that we expect such a high quality in writing, and then we put the officers in the worst possible conditions to write it. And I think when you get end of shift fatigue, I remember probably some of the worst reports that I personally wrote was you're coming off of a 10-hour shift. Maybe you're now over at 12 or 13 hours because you got a late arrest and you're sitting in your patrol car, you're sitting at the jail, or you're sitting in a arrest review, or you're sitting in a report writing and you're like typing and you're typing and you're typing and oh shoot. Oh shoot. And you got like a bunch of Z's and then so end of shift fatigue. So what I try to do when I was a patrol officer, my suggestion to young officers is go and write your reports as you go. When I was a young officer, I wanted to go to hot calls, right? So if I was typing a report, I heard something, okay, cool. Hey, show me 1081. I'm on route over here. I go over there. Next thing I know, I'm down 2, 3 reports. Bad idea. Slow down and write your reports as you go. Do not let them stack up. Okay. At the end of the shift, I was a few times where I had a late arrest. I did my probable cause. I would get permission from my sergeant. Hey, Sarge, can I come in and write this in the morning? They already have my affidavit. Can I go ahead and write the rest of the report in the morning? He said yes. So in my report later that day, hey, per Sergeant so-and-so, I was able to come back in and write the report. So you can make provisions to get away from that officer fatigue. I also think that writing your reports in your patrol car is also not always the greatest idea. It's the best place. We have all the tools to do it in there. One of the things that I would do if I had like a long family disturbance that I would maybe somebody didn't go to jail, but I needed a document or had a burglary or something like that. Sometimes we had places that I could go where I knew I could get out of my car, take my laptop. It was a safe environment, whether it was a courtesy room at like apartment complexes sometimes or a hotel, where you could go and sit down and actually write your report outside of the car, be a little bit more comfortable. Remember, when you're inside the car, you got to constantly be aware of what's around you, officer safety issues. And, you got the radio going off all the time. And so, whether you go back to the station or whether you have a safe place like a fire station or something like that, where you can get out of the car and go write the report, I think is better. And then trying to get away from the constant interruptions. One of the things that we started to do when I was still on the street was put ourselves out on report writing. So let's say I did go down, maybe we're really busy and you're down 1 or 2 reports. I would send the dispatch a message. Hey, I'm going to be what we would call 1086 or not available. I'm writing reports. And then I'd let my supervisor know, hey, Sarge, I'm down a couple reports. I need to get caught up. And I'm going to have my radio turned down. I'll be available on my cell phone. And I'm going to get these reports knocked out. Or I'm going to go back to the substation and knock these reports out. So by doing that, you're eliminating those interruptions. So time and environment, I think, is one of the major reasons why we get bad reports. Officers are rushing. Right. They're not able to articulate. They're not telling narratives and there's fatigue. They don't get the time and they're not putting themselves in a good situation to write those reports. I also think we have some cultural problems. Number 3. And the reason I say this, writing is treated like paperwork, not police work. And that's huge. We understand when I became a police officer, people told me, hey, it's going to be 80% report writing and documenting and 20% fun. They were absolutely right. When I became a police officer, I realized that it was 80% report writing, 20% fun, turning in evidence, documenting. But think about how important a chain of custody is or a police report actually is. So if we treat it just like, well, that's just the paperwork. Think about all the stuff that we're missing. We're not thinking of it as police work. So when you think of report writing, if you're my young officer out there, you're listening to this, and it's going to be in the class that we're going to put together, I want you to stop viewing report writing as paperwork, and I want you to view it as investigative, and I want you to review it as police work. That you're actually building a case, that this document, which you're writing, is going to be used for prosecution, or this document is going to be used to prove somebody is innocent, or this document is going to be used for whatever. right? So you want to make sure that you write good reports. Don't treat it like paperwork, treat it like police work. And I also believe that we should do better and maybe possibly figure out how we can reward officers for good reports. And I don't know what that looks like. So I want ideas, suggestions. If you're listening to this podcast right now, you hear my idea. Hey, how could we reward officers for writing better reports? I don't know what that looks like. Maybe we get some good ideas, start in the chat, whatever. I'll look in the chat. Let me know. But I think that's something that we can talk about. And maybe as a game starters, how do we get better reports and how to reward for them? I also say we need to bring in more accountability. This is to my supervisors out there. Hey, I know you've got a lot on your plate. I know you've got a lot of decisions to make. You got to listen to the radio. You got a lot of stuff going on. I get it. I do. But you have to hold your officers accountable. When I was a patrol officer on the street, I didn't have a single supervisor that would not hold us accountable for bad reports. If we wrote bad reports, our sergeants would call and tell us. It wasn't very often for me, but I remember getting a couple of times from Joe Vega when I was on day shift. Hey, dude, you forgot to do your racial profiling or whatever. He would hold me accountable. He would hold us accountable, and he was our corporal, but that's what our sarge had him doing. I always had supervisors that held us accountable for our reports. I know at the Austin Police Department, we have young supervisors, and I know that's been an issue, something that I've heard. And then we also have a lot of feedback loops. We get into our own little silos and we feedback, and we don't realize how far spread, I guess you could say, our bad report writing can cause ripple effects from crime analysts to investigations to, multiple things that could be affected by poor report writing. I also think, and this is a big one for me, is a fear-based writing. What I mean by fear-based is officers are afraid to get in trouble. We've created a climate in which officers work and operate that they're afraid to get in trouble. And I know when I was a young officer and I would hear my sergeant, Adam 390 to Adam 304, can you 25 me over here? Which means, can you meet me over here? You've got that little pucker factor. You got the, oh shit moment. What did I do wrong? Right? Well, if you're writing your reports with, man, I'm getting in trouble, you're not telling the story, especially when you have to use force. And use of force, don't just use sterile language, tell a story. And the best advice I ever got when it was talking about use of force reporting and writing a use of force report, Antoine Lane was our lieutenant. And I knew Antoine when he was an instructor at the academy. And then I knew Antoine when he was a sergeant. I watched him promote, and he retired from APD, and he went to work for Axon. I'm not sure where he is today. Antoine, if you see this podcast, give me a call. I'd love to catch up with you. But anyways, I remember he had just promoted to lieutenant, and he was a day shift lieutenant. And he came in. I was in Edward, and I was on day shift. And Antoine came in to show up that morning. And there was some stuff. There was they were changing use of force and stuff. Chief Acevedo was the chief at the time. Anyways, Antoine came in, and Lieutenant Lane, and he was like, "Hey guys, I want you to, when you're writing a use of force report, don't just tell me what you did, how you did it, and the suspects, actions and things like that. I also want you to tell me why you didn't do certain things as you escalated your use of force." That was huge to me because that tells a story. Antoine was saying, you're telling a story of what happened, and it's the story, it's your perspective, and now you're giving them data of why you didn't do it. So, for example, let's say I had to tase somebody. Okay, I had to deploy my taser. So I'm going to explain all the things that went up to leading, he did this, he did that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I tased the guy. Okay. But I have pepper spray on my belt. I have open hand controls. So in my police report, I would say, because of the subject's resistance or whatever, or his clinching or his size or whatever it is, I didn't feel that I could control him with basic open hand techniques. So I chose my taser. See what I just did there? The person reading my report is hearing the story and understands now in my mindset why I didn't go hands-on and I went to taser. Hey, I didn't use pepper spray because I was in a closed space, and inside of a residence or inside of a bar or whatever, pepper spray can have a negative effect. It can affect multiple people. Therefore, it wasn't good for me to deploy. Taser was the most effective because yada, 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 or whatever. Explain why you didn't use other force options leading up to this force option. Do you see what that does? When you do that, you're taking and telling a story for the person reading it. So now, instead of writing out of fear or getting in trouble, tell your story. Don't use a bunch of jargon, simple, clear, concise language. We have a communications course within Crime Prevention 2, a class. It's actually my favorite class that we teach, the Crime Reduction Institute. I highly recommend you take it. Next class coming up, I believe, is in September. But with that being said, when you're talking about writing, tell the story. Don't use a bunch of police jargon. Use simple, clear, concise language and be clear and concise. Clarity is your friend. Short, simple, concise. Now, let me tell you, anybody who knows me knows I like to talk. I can talk too much. Even in my writing, I have a tendency to repeat myself. Something that I have been working on is talking less, listening more, number one. But number two, really being clear and concise within my writing. And now you have all these tools like Grammarly and Chat GPT. Be careful with that though for police reports because it's not CJIS protected, so you can end up getting in trouble there. But Grammarly is probably your best option. But you can use programs like Grammarly to help you with your grammar and be clear, concise, and avoid being repetitive and take out the jargon. So that is my thing to you. If you're an officer listening to this, hey, don't write things like get in trouble. You know, when I was playing baseball, I remember I had my coaches always told me, if you play not to get hurt, you're going to get hurt. And the same thing is true in law enforcement. If you play not to get in trouble, you're going to get in trouble. Do your job. If you're going to use force, use overpowering, fierce blow, end it now. What looks worse? Hitting somebody 1,000 times or one simple blow, end it, get it done, de-escalate. Okay. Same thing in report writing. Be clear, be concise, get it done. Don't drag things out and use a bunch of jargon. Okay. Those are my advice on don't write out of fear. I also believe that, and chiefs that met me at the conference, I want to bring this out to you. RMS systems, I believe, can almost make things worse. You're like, John, you absolutely lost your mind. What are you talking about? Okay, remember how I said we have to be able to be clear, be able to think, be able to articulate, and we don't want to write out of fear. But I've been talking about clarity, right? Being clear. So think about this. A system, a report management system is written or there to manage data, but it's not there to think. It's data storage. So within an RMS, you have fragmented fields. You may have duplicate entries. You don't have guidance. This is the problem that we have at APD. Officers with Versadex have way too much leeway. So, for example, addresses, if it doesn't geoverify, if it doesn't geoverify, the officer can override it and still put the report in. So then I can get 10 different variances of the address. So if I'm talking about 10,000 North Lamar, I can get 10,000 North Lamar spilled out. I can get 10,000 Lamar. I can get 10,000 N Lamar Boulevard. I can get all kinds of variations and it all messes it up. So your RMS is just about data and data storage. It's not about thinking. Officers have to do the thinking. The data systems are just there for storage and easy getting the information out of storage, which is what we can help you in data distributions, which we're talking about the conference. Hit up CRI. Okay, so much for the plug. Now, these systems are your friend, but they can also be your worst enemy. So you have to give officers guidance. You have to have supervisors reviewing those reports because that is critically important. So slow down. Understand your RMS is not the end all to be all, but the officer themselves, the person entering the data into the system is important. And then knowing what to bring out of the system and correlating it to actual usable dashboards that are user-friendly to you is what I can do here at CRI to help you with your report writing or your report management, make your systems more effective. But You have to limit the amount that officers can put in, understanding that these systems don't think. It's just simple data storage, if then that type of applications within these systems. So RMS systems, if you're relying on those, they can almost make the problem worse, in my opinion. So we've talked about the causes, and on this show, I like to talk about solutions. I don't just tell you all the problems. So what a good report, how to write a good report, and when we do a good report, what does it actually do for us as law enforcement? A good report doesn't necessarily mean it has to be long. A good report is clear. A good report is clear. So what does a strong report do? Officers listening to this, I want you to pay attention. My sergeants listening to this, I want you to pay attention. I pride myself, and I believe now, my supervisor, John, he writes sucky reports. I don't believe that. I believe I write really good reports. A strong report does several things. Number one, it tells a chronological story. So when you do report writing, we're going to teach this in the new class that we're putting up in report writing. I want you to think about telling a chronological story. Tell the story from when you arrived using a passive voice, and tell the story of what you see. Paint a picture of the scene, and then tell each party's story. What this person said, what that person said, and tell the story. And then as you're telling the story, I want you to connect observations, actions, and outcomes. I'm going to say that again. Observations, actions, and outcomes. I want you to put those together. And then you're going to answer 3 simple questions. What happened? Why did it matter? And what did the officer do? What happened? Why did it matter? And what did the officer do? You want to answer those questions, telling a chronological story, connecting observations, actions, and outcomes. That's what a strong report does. And I tell people, when you write sentences, clear and concise, a paragraph should be 2 to 3 sentences. They don't need to be long. Clear, concise, what happened? Why did it matter? What did the officer do, or what did you do as the officer? Every report that you write, DWI, DUI, burglary, burglary of residence, burglary of vehicle, child endangerment, harassment, stalking, family violence, domestic, dating violence, any report, I don't care what it is, should follow the same mental flow. Okay, and I'm going to put it up on the screen so you guys can follow along. So number 1, why you are there. I want you to say why you were there. That's the first 2 to 3 sentences of your report. Number 2, what you saw or observed. Number 3, what did people tell you? Write their narrative. Write it out. What evidence supports it that you found on the scene? Then I want you to say what you did. Never speak for anybody else, only speak for yourself. And then what happened next? Did you make an arrest? Did you walk away? So on and so forth. Every police report should flow with those 6 themes. Again, why were you there? What did you see? What did people tell you? What evidence did you find that supports this? What you did and what happened next. If you do this, it'll work. This will create you a flow, and all your reports will be the same. Even in I remember writing my DWI reports, and I had a couple DWI prosecutors down in Travis County say they liked doing my reports because I was simple and I basically answered these questions, and I'd give them all the data they need. And you know what? I rarely went to court, guys. If you look at my career, the amount of times that I actually had to appear in court to give testimony, I've been there, many times, but not that often because I wrote good reports. I gave them what they needed. So oftentimes, because I wrote a good police report, documented why I was there, it gave prosecutors the opportunity to go and say, hey, we got this. Here's the evidence. The officer wrote a good report. This is what the detectives did. Hey, let's settle this case, plea it out, whatever. Remember this. If you read your report and it doesn't flow, it's not going to work. If it doesn't flow, it's not working for you. So you need to go back and make sure it flows. For it to flow, if you follow those 6 things in that exact order, don't go out of order, in that exact order, you are going to get awesome, well-written, well-thought-out police reports. So how do we fix the problem? I've been doing a lot of talking, and how do we fix the problem? I believe in the police academy, we need to do a better job of teach thinking. We need to do a better job of teaching people how to think and not to write in templates. But John, how do people think? One of the things that I do on all of the courses at CRI, if you come to a CRI course, and any of my students will tell you, our courses are very scenario-based, practical driven. We do a lot of things practicums. I make people actually think. I make people write papers. I make people put things down on paper. I make them to get into groups, and we think things through. So if you do more scenario-based training, you learn to teach people how to think. To be a good police officer, you have to be able to think. You have to be able to think quickly under pressure to make good decisions. Number 2, when you're talking about teaching thinking, we need to be able to teach them how to articulate real world things. So we need to teach better articulation, how to articulate why you did what you did and get away from boilerplate language, using simple language to speak while you do it. People that speak very simply are very easily understood. We don't want to be like a bunch of pointy-headed intellectuals. We want to be very simple in our language. Also, we want to teach officers how to be focused on decision making. We want them to be able to make decisions. So if we're teaching them how to use real world articulation, if we're teaching them how to be decision makers, and we're doing scenario-based training, then we're getting thinking, and we're have a system that flows, and we're going to get better police reports because officers are then going to be able to think it through and put their thoughts down in a nice flow. We also want to build good feedback loops, right? If no one corrects something, it never improves. So you as a supervisor have to give feedback. That's what I mean by a feedback loop. We have poor feedback loops. We have to increase that. Okay, so supervisors, hey, you actually gonna have to read the reports. I know that's almost like, wow, actually, yes. Every report that comes across your desk that one of your officers, you should at least read or speed read, skim that report and make sure it's in that flow that I just talked about. And then be able to give specific feedback and show up to your officers. Critically, critically important. And in training, going back to the training, we want to show people, hey, this is what a police report that looked bad, this officer improved, and this is what looks good. So we can show before and after examples. So if you have an officer that's writing bad reports, you set them aside, teach them these things, send them to the CRI online class or whatever on report writing, then look at the before and after and actually sit down. Spend time of your show up teaching your officers. Spend a few minutes each day going over grammar, teaching them how to write better reports, teaching them how to think. Also, reduce cognitive load to the officer. Autofill basic data. In today's world, with all the geo-verification that we have within our reporting system, officers should not have the option to put in the address. If your CAD system or your report management system is using a geo-verification and the officer puts in 10,000 North Lamar, but that's not, it's actually should be 10,000, they put 10,000, spell out North Lamar Boulevard, but it's actually 10,000 N Lamar Boulevard. That's the geo-verified actual address with the correct zip code and everything, then it should pre-fill that. So you have an autofill. These things should autofill. Dates, times should all autofill based on CAD. So you need to make sure that your CAD or your computer aided dispatch is married up to your RMS and they can communicate so that it autofills. That should be easy to do with today's technology, especially with artificial intelligence coming into the world. And we're going to do future episodes talking about different RMSs and the AI that's out there that Axon and others are developing and how these autofill processes will do that. What this does is this eliminates the duplicate entries. And so instead of you having, 10 different addresses entered 10 different ways, this makes it standardized. So you're taking it, I hate to say this, but you're kind of dumb-proofing it, right? Because if you're doing all that autofill on all that other data, then you're allowing officers to focus on the narrative. So let's say, for example, an officer runs an individual and they're put in the call. Like for us, I can run somebody through dispatch or I can run them on the MDT and I get the return. I can take and I can put that into the call itself. Well, if the RMS is communicating with the CAD system and I go to write a report in my report management system, then it should autofill from CAD into the report, suspects, victims, whatever, based on who I ran or anything that I enter over here. So then I'm eliminating the amount of duplicate entry. So officers aren't having to transcribe from this to this because the transcription is where you get mistakes. So try to make it as seamless as possible so the officers can focus on their narrative. We've talked about it, but I want to hit it again. It's talking about normalizing plain language. Simple writing is professional writing. We're not bureaucrats. I can't stand bureaucratic language. We're not lawyers. My police report should not read like a lawyer. I'm not writing a paper for college. I'm writing a professional paper. If you go read professional papers, they're very simple. Short sentences, direct statements, and cut out all the unnecessary jargon and BS. Simple writing. Simple writing is professional writing. I'll say it again. Simple writing is professional writing. It's what I teach and will be taught in the new class that's coming out. We also have to align our incentives. We have to recognize strong report writing and encourage people. If you have an officer that's particularly good at writing reports, use his or her report and show others, hey, it was like this. In my unit at the very beginning, we had a couple people that came to us in the district representative's office in the community engagement crime prevention unit, and they struggled with some of their writing. So myself and a couple of the other officers that were better writing, they would send us their reports or their emails and we would help them get better writing. And over time, they got better at what they do. So we have to help each other out. That goes back to building each other, the abundance mentality, all the things that I love to talk about on the show and in my personal life. Aligning those incentives, track quality, and make sure we're holding officers accountable to that quality. So as we get down to the end of the show, we come down, going back to what I was talking about with the chiefs at the conferences. We were talking about report writing and report management systems. So what does the modern report management system actually do for you? What should you be looking for in this system? Technology shouldn't slow officers down. It should make them better. But unfortunately, I've seen technology slow us down. What I mean by that is when the handhelds came out and the ticket writers came out, I could literally do a paper crash report in like 15 minutes. And now over here, because the technology sucked, it was taking me 2 hours. Now it's gotten much better. Technology has come a long way, but we want to make sure the technology is working for us to make officers better. So don't cut corners and go just on expense. Get a system that actually works for you. And one of the things that you want to look for in a good RMS system for your report writing is guided narrative writing. And what I mean by that is there are RMSs there that have guided writing. So it'll give you a prompt. It'll prompt the officer, hey, what did the victim say? What evidence supports probable cause? So there's a prompt. When I make a template for officers teaching them how to do assessments, like on buildings and risk and vulnerability assessments, I give them a template. I give them a guided narrative. So I give them questions that they can basically answer. If they answer the questions, they actually will have a full narrative written. Well, there's report writing systems that do the same thing. That's not a template. It's asking the officer to think, what did the victim say? And then you write down the victim said A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? What evidence supports probable cause? So now you're getting them to think about, okay, what is my evidence and how does my evidence support probable cause? If I have a stabbing, okay, I have a bloody knife in the sink. Okay, boom. I have evidence. You see what I'm saying? So talk about the evidence, how it supports. They also have in some of these modern systems, I believe they call it smart auto population. So again, the names, the locations, the time will automatically flow, and then that helps you flow into your narrative. And then they also have real-time error detection within some of the more modern RMSs out there. So if you are writing a burglary report and you made an arrest, it'll tell you what missing elements you have. And it'll also point out to you timeline inconsistencies, which is a really cool thing. So now it's as the officer's writing in and their timeline is all messed up, then it comes in and says, hey, you have timeline inconsistencies or your report's incomplete, and it helps you fix that. We have something similar to that in our Versadex system, but it's pretty old, pretty antiquated. Not trying to knock my department, just saying the truth. They also have some new stuff now, voice to report. I met some folks at Corpus Christi. I met companies, one that I'm probably going to talk to because we were talking about how we can integrate some of their technology into what I'm doing at CRI, but voice to report. So now officers can actually speak into the system. I believe my buddy up, Vincent Glenn, detective up in Waco, was telling me they have this capability now where the officer can actually like basically narrate the report in like a recorder or whatever, and then the RMS structures the narrative for you. So you're actually, instead of typing it, you're narrating it. Again, that's great because the officer's thinking, the officer articulating, using simple language, and using artificial intelligence and AI to help you write those report. Also, searchable intelligence. Getting usable data, that's one of the things that we do at CRI. We help you, chiefs, and those out there to better utilize your RMS and get you better usable data and easier subsets into PowerPoint, spreadsheets, dashboards, things like that. Also, cross case linking, things like that. You want that in your RMSs. Make sure you have that capability. Make sure that you have dashboards that supervisors can utilize to automatically find and find weak reports, track and improve trends. There's also evidence integration. So now the RMS, instead of having like a whole, like, let's say you have Axon and you have a whole server for that, you can actually integrate your body cam, your photos, your statements, embed them seamlessly to communicate with each other. You also have like mobile first. You have, things that are fast, all these things that you have that are built for the field. So the RMS is really important, and I know a lot of chiefs that I was talking to at conference are all shopping for new RMS and upgrading, and I was able to talk to them how we can help in that. So we've talked a lot, but I want to get back to the very simplicity. For any data-driven policing to actually work, for you truly to gather evidence and be able to do things that are data-driven and get data, we have to get officers to write better reports. I would submit to you for your consideration, we don't have a report writing problem. We have a system design problem. We have a training problem. And so what we have to do is fix our training and get better thinking. We have to fix our culture and say, hey, we're not just writing a report. We're actually doing police work and building an investigation, which gives us better effort. And then we have to fix our technology, make it better so that we get better outcomes and eliminate the errors of officers using technology to take those errors out, like addresses, times, and places and things like that. Because at the end of the day, a police report, as I said, is not paperwork. It's a story of what happened. That's critical to remember. It's not paperwork. It's a story of what happened. If we get the story wrong, everything else is put at risk. Bad investigation, bad things come when we don't do it the right way. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Man, we hit you with a lot. If you like what we talked about, if you again like this podcast, please like, follow, give us a like. Tell us what your feedback is. I got some cool stuff coming down the road. We got new classes coming out. Like I told you, that report writing class, please look for that. My leadership class just came out. Man, please go to our website, crimereductioninstitute.com. Check out the brand new leadership class. And I'm going to put up a code here, Chiefs 2026. Guess what? You could take that class free of charge right now. If you use that title code, that's going to be good for at least another month or so. It will actually be good through the end of the month. So make sure you use that code, Chiefs 2026. Please take that code, take that class for free. Tell us about that leadership class. I had a lot of people ask me for it. Took me almost 4 months to build it. I thought it was well thought out. I brought in a lot of professionals. I spoke and consulted with people. I think you're going to really love that class. It's one of my best. Don't forget about our crime prevention on patrol class. And we have an awesome class for that. If you're a police agency, we have agency discounts to access our online training. If you're a certified crime prevention specialist in the state of Texas, and you're not currently a crime prevention officer, I got online classes to help you maintain your TCOL certificate. We also got new classes coming up. We got SEPTED coming up in a couple weeks down in San Marcos. And then we got the CCPS exam. We just finished CP2. We graduated 14 people out of our Crime Prevention 2 a couple weeks ago, and they did a great job. So proud of each and every one of those officers. I'm going to see most of them back at SEPTED in a couple weeks. But we got a lot happening here, a lot going on. And I really love you guys. I love this show. I love what we're doing. And I just want to make policing better. I want to change the world. I want to build trust. And this is the Blue Line Project. We don't just talk about policing, we rethink it, and we're Blue Line strong. Thank you for tuning in today's show. And I'll see you all the next time on the next broadcast. Signing off for the Blue Line Project is your host, John Gabrielson. See you next week.